All right, spring is here and I am so ready. The soil is warming up and the sun is out. I can actually be out here without a coat and a hat and mittens, and I'm ready to plant. Today I wanted to share with you the steps that I take before I start to plant in my beds. I've already done this in 4 of my 6 beds and I've only got these 2 beds left. So I thought I'd bring you along to show you the 3 steps I take before I put any plants into the garden for spring. Now, the first thing is just to test your soil temperature. I've been doing this for over a month, just waiting and waiting for the day to come where the soil was workable. Workable soil basically means that when you dig in 4 to 6 inches into the soil of your bed, the soil is loose and porous and is ready to be planted. I've been testing it almost every week for the last 4 weeks, and it's really just in the last week that I could take my hori and dig down to, the full depth of the shovel and not hit frozen ground. So this is one of the reasons why I love growing in raised beds, because these beds warm up about, say, 15, 21 days before the beds that are in ground. So checking for workable soil and even testing your soil temperature. So you can get a soil temperature gauge, just stick it down into your soil, and you want to get a good read on what temperature the soil is at, say, 4 to 6 inches below the soil surface. This is going to really let you know what kinds of plants can go into the garden at this point, because every single plant, every single seed is temperature sensitive. So knowing that temperature is going to help guide you on to know what to plant this season. So that's step 1, making sure that your soil is workable and checking the temperature of your soil. The next step I like to do is just simply to clear the debris from my garden space. So from the winter, from the previous season, there's always a few things that are kind of left over that need to be cleared out before I start planting. So some of this I've already started kind of taking the chaff away from my chive plants. If there's extra leaves or debris, you can work those in, but generally I like to take them out because I'm going to be doing a lot of direct seed sowing in the garden space. Then little simple things like this is actually a sun gold skin. Leaving these things in the garden, you can end up with lots of volunteer tomatoes, things that start growing in the garden space that you don't actually want to be there. So I usually start with just a simple rake and just kind of rake through the surface of the garden space, just making sure that I get all the debris off of the surface of the soil before I start to plant. Now in this bed, I've actually got rows of garlic planted. So you can start to see, you see these 3 white signs I have here from Botanical Interest, and those actually show garlic that I planted just before things got really cold here. So it was back in, I think October, end of October, beginning of November. So the garlic is just starting to sprout. You can see the very starts of it here. We have our very first little garlic sprout. This one's starting to come a little bit, not as fast. I have them about every 6 or so inches. So when I'm clearing the garden space, and you can do this as well, if you have perennials or if you have plants that you seeded or started before winter, you just want to be sure you don't disturb those as you're cleaning up the garden space. So I've already accidentally pulled a few of the garlics cleaning up the garden. Also back here you can see some of these bulbs, they're actually not well planted. So after the snow cleared, I don't know if it was the extra moisture from the snow or what, but a lot of these garlic bulbs have been, or cloves have been somewhat displaced. So just making sure that each of them is more firmly planted. And let me tell you, you can smell the garlic. It's so crazy. The minute I touch these things, it's like this huge fragrance fills the air. So just making sure each of these garlics is well situated in the soil before I start to amend it and get ready to plant. So like these little sun golds, they can look really innocent, right? It's this little shriveled skin from a sun gold from last year, but a couple years ago, I just let these be and they ended up volunteering. They self-seeded, and I had all these little baby sun golds. And sun golds are actually a hybrid tomato, so they don't grow true from their seed. Anyway, I ended up with just sun golds everywhere. It was a huge mess and just too much work. So right now, if you catch it at the start of the season, this less work that you have to do later. So worst first, you know, that's a thing I say all the time. So clearing the debris, that's next. And then as soon as I'm done clearing the debris, that's step number 2. Step number 3 is simply to add a layer of compost. So there are amendments you can bring to the soil if you wanted to test your soil for nutrients, you know, just making sure that the pH balance of your soil is good. I'll be honest, I rarely do that. Instead, I just use compost to amend my soil, and I generally find I have a very healthy garden just simply doing this each and every season. So I'm using Purple Cow activated compost. This is a peat-free compost option. It's made, I always just check the label when I'm buying, and this one is made with compost, worm castings, kelp meal, bone meal, rock phosphate, and volcanic ash. So I do make my own compost, but I don't make enough to cover my beds each season. So I use what I can, and that's homemade, but I find that even with my garden space, it's really hard to have enough compost for the demands of the garden. So this is a 1 cubic foot, so it's basically 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. And I've generally found that about 1 bag is sufficient for this box. So this is a 15 square foot raised bed. So usually 1 cubic foot is going to cover, more than sufficiently cover what my needs for the bed. So if you're growing in, say, 32 square feet or 60 square feet, you can about average that 1 cubic foot of compost will take care of your needs in the garden for each 15 to 16 square feet of garden space. So I just spread this out. As you can see, it doesn't take much to get the soil. Basically, I like to have it level with the raised bed. And I've used all kinds of tools to level this out, and honestly, I found there's really nothing that compares to my hand. So I just level it out like this, and now I am ready to plant. So I'm going to be adding just some simple things to get us started here in this bed, and I'll talk to you about a couple of things that I'll be adding later this week. So this much compost, I used a little bit less than half the bag for the front part of this bed. Then I'll do the same for the back, and then I'll probably need almost one more bag for this bed. You can already see the difference, right? Like, look at the value and the color texture of this bed versus that one. You can just tell already this one is much more fresh, much more ready to go. So a simple thing I love to do each season is just to add some color to the corners of the bed. And I could grow these myself, but I didn't this year. So I'm just adding some pansies or some violas to the corners of the bed. Pansies is another option. That was like the other plant I was considering. I often do herbs in the corners as well. So just putting that right there on the edge, it adds a little bit of, you know, prettiness to the bed very quickly. And I can kind of fill in around there. So this is always generally the very first thing I do is put these cool season flowers. They'll hang on there whenever there's frost or cold. And it just brings a little bit of brightness to the bed before I start planting my other plants. So I think I bought 12 of these for my 6 beds. So I was gonna do 2 per bed. So I'll probably do 2 of these in each of the front corners of the beds, and then add a different kind of flower in the back corners. So adding a little flowers. I do have herbs that I've started indoors. So I've got oregano and thyme and sage. And as soon as temps get a little bit higher, I'll be putting these right on the corners next to the flower. So it gives this nice kind of permanence to the bed as I plant the interior with more annual plants. Now the next thing I'm going to put in are some dinosaur kales. I love growing kale, and kale is one of those first plants you can put into the garden. Kale has Savoy leaves, and so this is going to do really well even though there's lots of chance for frost and cold ahead. Now, when you're watching this, spring for you may be a very warm season. So if you're heading toward a warm season, instead of putting something like kale in, you're going to want to be planting something like peppers or eggplants or tomatoes, plants that are not frost sensitive and that love to grow in warmer temperatures from like 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm entering the next 2 months are going to be between, say, 55 to 75 in terms of the high, and there is still a threat of frost. So my big plants I'll be putting into the garden are going to be things like kale, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower. Those will be the big plants I'm putting in. Now, thankfully, I do have my lines here because now I basically just covered up my garlic as it's starting to grow in. But I know I've got this line here of garlic and this one and this one. And the great thing is that kale is going to grow really well among garlic. Kale is one of those plants that's often attacked by cabbage moths and caterpillars, and garlic is a deterrent for those. So even though these are going to be battling a little bit for space, they can work really well together. So I'm going to go right in between these two lines of garlic, and I'm actually going to try to be between the rows of garlic as well. So I'm trying to go into the stagger. I've got garlic here and garlic here, and so I'm hoping to plant right in between. Now, garlic is a long grower. Garlic is not going to be ready to harvest here until mid to late summer. So by that time, this kale is going to have been harvested many, many times over. And if I get to the place where the kale seems like it's fighting with the garlic for space, I'll just opt to pull the kale out, or I'll harvest the garlic early and just harvest the garlic maybe for a green garlic instead of a full bulb. I always get confused whether I should call it a bulb or a clove. All right, so that is it. So I've got my kale. I'm going to do the same thing back here on the bed. I'll add more compost, plant another kale plant, and then this bed is basically getting ready to go. I'll come back here later and I'm going to add some seeds. So I'm going to be growing carrots in this bed from seed. I'll also be growing some peas along this trellis, and probably some short radishes that can grow, say, 25 to 30 days from now. I may even add some beets too. So most of this bed is going to be full of seeds, but I do like to have some plants that'll be growing as well. So there you have it. That's really the only things you need to do. If you've already got your raised bed set up, the only thing you need to do before you plant for spring is 1, check the soil temperature and make sure your soil is workable. Number 2, add in some compost, at least a couple, number 2 is clean your bed from debris, making sure there's nothing left from the previous season that's going to interfere with this season's growth. And then number 3, my favorite obviously, is adding a couple layers, a couple inches of compost before you start planting. Do these 3 things and you're going to set yourself up for success for the season ahead. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.